Hi everyone, welcome to our session today on PRPOI. We have a very special session for you today. Our panel today is Let's Talk Tech PR. I know myself, I always like to call myself not a tech person, but the fact is, technology is here to stay with us. You cannot ignore it, you have to live with it, and it's growing, and how? It's interwoven in every aspect of our lives today. So, how do you upskill yourself in this field? What does tech PR mean? Can you switch from lifestyle to tech with ease? What skill sets are necessary for this vertical? This is all there on our wonderful panel today. I'd also like, before I introduce all our other panelists, I'd like to take a moment to thank our media partner, Scribe, our other content curators, Tarunjit Ratan and Pooja Trehan Dhamecha. I'd also love to wish you all a very happy Saturday and a wonderful World Mental Health Day. Take that break, enjoy this weekend, and do learn to upskill with us. Our session today is also simulcasting on YouTube, so take a seat, enjoy the show, and allow me to introduce our panelists to us. Our first panelist is Debaman Guin, Director Communications Lucidius. Debaman started his career in PR from former Text 100 and has been in the industry for 8 years now. He has led multiple B2B technology mandates during his agency stint and now manages analyst relations and public relations for Lucidius, a leading cybersecurity and digital business risk qualification company. Some of the businesses he has managed in the past include IBM, Panasonic, NXP, Xerox, among others. Let's welcome Debaman to our panel. Hi, how
Hi
are you
Sonali,
today?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well. Thank you for joining us. Just give me a moment while I bring our other panelists in. Our other panelist is someone I think a lot of the world knows. We all have respected him and seen his writing, his thoughts on media, on social media. That's Nimish Dubey. He has about 20 years experience in the field of tech writing. He understands the nuances of the profession and its complicated relationship with PR. He champions and often advises both sides to be human to each other. His wealth of knowledge, I am not going to speak about because it speaks for himself. So does his reputation. And I would love to welcome Nimish to our panel.
Hi,
Hi, Nimish. Thank you for being with us today.
absolute
And
pleasure. Yeah, absolute pleasure.
thank you so much for joining in. And I'm just going to bring in our third panelist today, who is Shalini Singh, founder Galvanise PR. She comes with close to 3 decades of experience in tech PR. She runs Galvanize PR. She also runs AndWeMet.com, an online matchmaking service for urban Indians, which was launched in 2019. Working on both her ventures gave her an insight into not promoting tech companies alone, but also how to build one from the ground up. So, Shalini, welcome to the panel.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'd just like to thank all three of you to be here on this panel, and we are looking forward to a very interesting session today. I think some of our learnings are already there from how technology today has taken over all our lives, and that's really what we'd like to discuss on how PR professionals can not be intimidated by it, but can learn the nuances of this profession from the three of you who have followed such brilliant career trajectories in this field. Um, we are going to begin with a little bit about your backgrounds. We'd love to know from all three of you how you decided to get into technology writing or technology PR. So I'm going to begin with asking this question to Debaman. And I think we also have some technical difficulty right now with some sound coming. Can everybody hear me? Okay, so my request would be that maybe the other panelists can be on mute because otherwise we have a little sound coming in. So Devaman, I'm going to begin with you. I'm going to keep this in alphabetical order as much as possible, though we'll try and mix things up along the session. How did you decide to get into tech PR? How was it? What was the moment of that decision? How did you decide? Was it the first career option for you?
Firstly, thank you, Sonali, for having me here. It's a pleasure to be discussing tech PR here. To answer your question, it was completely by chance. I was open to any sector when I started my career with Archetype, formerly Text 100. One of my first clients was Xerox, which is a completely B2B solutions provider and a printing and packaging player. So it was completely by chance. I had another fintech client, which I started with. And eventually working on those two clients, I was really got interested in how technology functions, what is the business of tech, and that's shortly and briefly how I started my career into tech.
Okay, thank you. So you're all and out. I mean, that was the first thing that attracted you into the profession. No intimidation, no worries, just deep dive. So Nimish, we are coming to you. How did you begin? How did this journey of writing in tech begin?
Uh, it began because I was in one of my friends ran a tech portal and they had an iBook and all his reporters were outside and they needed a review in 3 days. So he said, "Okay, you know English, you use a computer, please write about this." And I was like, I write about cricket. At that time, I was writing about cricket. I was like, I run a cricket website. I don't know what to do here. They go, "Don't worry, just use it. Use it like a computer." And I mean, he threatened to strangle me when he first saw the first draft, but then he says the parts of it which are kind of okay. And the readers liked it, which was rather surprising. I'm grateful for it, but that's how I got into it. It was not intentional. I wanted to write about cricket and music.
So what kept you there?
Oh, good old survival. Good old survival. And one is a freelancer. One works where one gets a lot of work from, obviously. Sports was already well populated. Sports and music, which were my fields at that stage, were very celebrity dominated. You had to be a former artist or you had to be a former sports person to have a toehold in there, which I wasn't. Tech was relatively new. We're talking of 1999, 2000. Steve Jobs had just come back to Apple a few years ago, and there were not too many people writing on tech at that time. Tech PR didn't exist. My career started in PR, and my first client actually was Motorola when we introduced the first flip phone, which wasn't the Razor. It was something called the StarTAC. So I knew a bit of tech from there, but what at that time there was no tech beat. You used to go to the business editor of the page and say, okay, Motorola has brought out something. It was not a product, it was Motorola has brought out something and how it fits into the corporate strategy. Reviews and all that didn't exist. But as these things got a bit more mainstream, the demand for it kept coming in, and there wasn't that much demand for other things. And I think I was kind of all right at it. They were very patient editors.
That's excellent. That's a lovely story. What about you, Shalini?
So
Tell us a little about your journey.
yeah, so I started my career as a kindergarten teacher, and I just didn't, I think I just had too much of energy, and coming home at 2 o'clock wasn't working for me. And somebody told me about this startup, or I'm talking about literally about 27, 28 years back. Said that this is a company and he's looking to start a PR firm. And I had no idea what PR is. I just knew public relations. And I go for an interview, and this gentleman says, "This is an IT PR company." And I said, "Income tax." And he said, "No, information technology." And then he said, HP, I'm going to hire you, and HP is what you're going to handle. And I said, "Hindustan Petroleum." And he said, "No, it's Hewlett Packard." And I'd just like to correct Nimish. I joined when there wasn't even computers were just, at least Nimish had seen a computer. We had one computer. We used to get connected to VSNL and,
Mhm.
wait for that black screen.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, yeah, so I joined that agency. And, I've worked for clients which don't even exist now, from like a 3Com or a Cabletron. If you ever, I mean, I don't know if there are youngsters listening to it, they may have not even heard about it. So, yeah, so that's how my journey started. And I think I had a great manager and I had great clients. And I think we were learning together. And my interest just grew because to see the power of technology and what technology can do and deliver. And it just continued, and here I am talking to you about it.
Thank you for that, Shalini. Very, very interesting story. I think we are all going to have a very good laugh remembering the HP version, and I think we've all been guilty of that. So I'm coming back, and Nimish, I'm going to address this question to you. Shalini, do you want to mute your mic because there's a little disturbance there? Yeah, thank you. So Nimish, I'm coming to you. You mentioned there was nothing called tech PR in that time. My question to you would be, how would you define tech PR? I mean, I'm sure our audience today is made up of all sorts of professionals. Help us to put it down into some understandable parameters.
It's I think what happens in generally is in the media is everything starts under an umbrella, and then as consumer interests, reader interests begin to increase in a certain section, they get separated. So classically, when I was getting into the profession, or when I was, shall I say, when I started reading, let's go further back. When I started reading a newspaper, even sports journalism wasn't exactly a very well-defined field. It used to be just one page at the back. So what happened was you would have the odd person who would cover cricket and who would travel with the team, and the odd person who would cover football. But there were a lot of generalists at that time. The journalists were generalists, so to speak, if one indulges in wordplay. But then as interest started increasing, more sponsors started putting in money, there were more readers coming in, then you start seeing a bit of specialization creeping in. And I think that's what's happened in tech also. It initially began as something that used to maybe, you would get a single column space somewhere in a corner of a newspaper, or somebody would just mention that, okay, there's a new phone. I mean, who buys a phone, for God's sake, in those days? That was the general attitude. A mobile phone was something extremely expensive. But then as it got more mainstream, we have seen people specializing. And now we have come to a stage where if you talk about tech PR and you want to define tech PR, you would say tech PR has got sub-streams right now. If I sometimes look at it, there are agencies which have divisions which handle B2B PR, and there's B2C PR, and then you have people who are saying, okay, consumer devices, mobile devices, printers is a completely different ball game. So there's anything that deals with technology, consumer, a business, and technology. By technology, I think in this case, we mean anything that has a microchip in it. I mean, classically, even a gas stove is technology, even a torch is technology. But what we are saying is there's a bit of intelligence embedded in there using a processor of some sort. Anything that has got to do with communicating the virtues, the importance of such devices and what drives them, I think that would be called tech PR right now.
Sally, would you like to add to this, because you have so much, you've been there for so long, and you mentioned you joined when there was not even a computer around.
No, computers. No. Computers had just started. I mean, they were computers. I had not seen a computer. I joined when NIT used to advertise on television. That learn computers, and if you don't know, you'll turn into a dinosaur. So basically, a face, and they would turn it into a dinosaur. The tech that I started with was more B2B and enterprise technology, and not consumer technology. They were, and I see those publications not there now. But for example, they were publication houses. So like the Express Group had Express Computers, and also it was not only enterprise technology, but there were publications for channels, for value-added resellers, and I'm talking B2B, right? So we had the publication house Cyber Media was there. We also used there was Express. There still is Express Computers. There was Computer World, PC World. There's so many of them have kind of disappeared as well. Plus, it also included, which is there true today as well, though I don't see many agencies doing it, is reaching out to industry analysts. So like the Gartners, the KPMGs, so because they're because you need to educate them as well on what's happening on your side as a client. So I come from that school of tech and tech PR, and I still continue to do so. Though I see, well, currently we're not working with many enterprise brands, and I hope that we end up signing up. I kind of really enjoy the B2B side. B2C is there, but I personally enjoy more the B2B side.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I'm going to address the next question to Debaman. Debaman, we've heard Shalini speak a lot about B2B and B2C PR. Could you help us define it? Because you've worked across consumer brands, you've also worked across a lot of industry brands. So can you help us a little to do that a bit?
So I think great points mentioned by Shalini and Nimish both. Before go on to the PR side, it's very important to understand that today technology encompasses even every minute of our lives. You're looking at a smartphone or you're using an AC, it's there everywhere. You're ordering food from Zomato. Everything is technology, right? To me today, technology PR is how do you consumerize the jargon such as artificial intelligence, machine learning. Um, that is what technology PR is today. For example, let's say Google Photos, right? It uses artificial intelligence supervised learning to throw the right results. If you use an iPhone today, there are app suggestions. All of them are artificial intelligence. So there's a myth that B2B and B2C, or B2B is very difficult, B2C is easier. I think the lines today are very blurred. You're using AI every day, but it's just that you don't realize it maybe. So for me, tech PR is how do you simplify, consumerize these conversations today? So I think that's the most important thing. And to me, that's the ideal definition of tech PR.
Thank you for that. We have some thoughts on. We want to also would be great, Nimish, if you could throw some light on what do you think are the skills needed from a journalist point of view, from a good tech PR professional. What are you looking at in them when they approach you? Your mic is off, Nimish.
Yeah. So pretty much the skills that one needs are largely similar to that which we see in other fields, to be very honest. And the most important thing, in my opinion, is you should know what you're talking about. You should know what you're talking about. It sounds very logical. It sounds very obvious, but then the simple things are the most complicated ones, aren't they? Because what what really can when a PR person, when does a PR person, to use a term, lose a journalist? They lose a journalist when the journalist feels this person does not know enough. I know more than this person does. You see, then the person is not going to come back to you with queries. He's going to go to, he or she in this case is going to go to someone else for information. That's where things go wrong. Now, the challenge that a lot of people face is, in spite of the so-called commitment that many agencies give people that, oh, we are going to have a dedicated executive to your account. The fact is, most of us end up multitasking. It may not be that I'm working on 5 accounts, but it might be somebody is ill and they need a bit of a helping hand. It's the same agency. I might have to divert some time there. So your attention span gets, shall I say, divided, and your knowledge of the product sometimes can be a casualty. Now, what we have, the challenge that we're having right now is that because there are so many tech products, and technology is a bit of a freak in this regard, as in, it's worse than the movies. You have what? You have 3 movies in a week. Technology right now, you've got like 15, 16 launches a week. Now, you're expecting the poor person to remember everything about everything and talk to 7 different people, remember what they told whom. The biggest skill you can have is a lot of curiosity to know exactly what you're talking about, and a terrific memory. If you can get those into place, and then of course you have the memory, you have your curiosity, if you can dumb it down and you can bring it to the journalist saying, this is what I think you need, this is how it's going to help you, this is where it's going to fit in, I think that would work perfectly. It's a hell of a challenge because there's just a lot happening there.
So my question is now addressed to Debaman and Shalini. You work, as Nimish said, there's a lot happening in tech, and it's a field which probably you need to keep upgrading skill sets all the time, right? I mean, it's not something where what you knew last year has probably changed this year, right? How do you people keep your skill sets upgraded? What can a PR professional do? Are there any resources out there for a young person? We all agreed I think we all are in agreement that you just need basic common sense, intelligent, good language skills. But what would you say is, how do they keep upgraded with the latest knowledge? I'd love to hear from you, Debaman. How do you keep abreast, because technology is an ever changing field, right?
For me, Sonali, especially because I'm sitting inside the corporate communications department, I think the biggest advantage, and even for agency folks, right, is to talk to the product people, talk to the business more often. What we usually tend to do is, see the news, what's happening, and there's something called trend jacking, right? We want to have our quote right there in a relevant story. But where we often forget is get the offering first, understand what's the vision of the business. If you don't get those two aspects, it's really difficult to go out and pitch the story, right? If you're talking to your not even the people inside the organization, because as agency folks you usually tend to talk only to the comms people, but it's important to touch base with the product folks, see what they have to talk about the product, because they are the really passionate ones and they can really dig deep and give you the explanation of what my product or service is going to do. And if you talk about AI, even to me, I will have a certain level of understanding. But if you talk to my deployment guys who are actually deploying that platform, they'll give you a hell lot of knowledge. So I think it's more how do you talk to the business, get intelligent answers, ask intelligent questions, and get that understanding from them.
Thank you for that. What about you, Shalini? How would you train people to create a perfect tech? How should they upgrade their skills?
Um, Absolutely ask intelligent questions, but even ask the most dumbest questions as well. Dumb it down. Um, you know, don't think, I mean, it's okay to accept that you don't know. So, as he said, absolutely talk to your customer more. Even ask your customer, right? Or if you're an agency, ask your client to get you to sit in their internal meetings. Okay, I have done all of that in my life history, when I look back. So I have gone, even when I was in the, when even now, and when I started off and I was the agency, and even when I was the client, we used to actually get the team actually to sit in, to listen to conversations, to sit with the technical person, ask him to demystify it as if you are in kindergarten, literally explain to them how does this networking work, how does an email reach from your, you need to be curious, more than, and then when you need to be curious, you sit and you do that. You also, I think also you need to have a lot of media workshops. What I am seeing right now is you continue promising coverage to your client, right? You need to keep in mind that the journalist also has only this much of time. Okay, and the journalist gives you only 40 minutes of the time, and you want in that 40 minutes you want to cram up everything. So you should also set expectations with your client that every engagement doesn't result in coverage. You should tell your client that we need to introduce technology to the journalists. So sit in those media workshops, right? And try and get a customer also there in that media workshop if you can. Try and get an analyst, plus a lot of reading. You have to read what's happening around the globe. Times have changed. So you need to, what I see today is, okay, you make a pitch and I'll go and pitch it. I'll write the pitch. But when you are pitching, just like Nimish said, okay, it's a storytelling. How will you tell the story if you do not understand what the product is addressing? What is the product solving? It's a separate discussion which we can have later with Nimish. That does media give a PR folks time to listen? That I don't want to bring up here, but yeah, but that's it from my side for now.
Okay, thank you, Shalini. Nimish, I'm getting a lot of questions from the audience. So I'm going to address this head on to you right now because we are like quite much into the session. What is a tech journalist looking for? They all are looking for the young people on who are following our panel right now are asking this question. What is the holy grail? What is a tech journalist looking for? So I'm going to have to address this to you. I know it's a very broad-based question, but can you help our young
Ah, what's a tech journalist looking for? There are many. There are a number of answers to that. As in everything in humankind, there are a number of answers. We are all different people. We all look at different things. Speaking for somebody who's an old fogey and idealistic, I would say that we are all looking at, someone like me would be looking at ways in making someone do something which makes their lives easier through technology. If uh, a lot of people get a big kick out of reviewing new devices and posing with the latest new gadget and all that, but I somehow find it a lot better if, if some 60-year-old writes back and says, I was able to do this on my iPad. That was amazing. So for me, it's a very, I look at it as a very enabling, it's a very empowering task because we get information. It's classic journalism. We get access to something that the general reader doesn't, and we have to convey it to the general reader in such a way that some value is added to their lives. Like in politics, you give them some extra information so maybe they can vote better. Maybe they can decide better on what policy matters are. In business, you give them the information so maybe they can decide what product to buy or where to invest money. I think technology is exactly the same. We get access to devices, we get access to new applications, AI, all kinds of concepts. Our job is to bring it down. The journalist, a tech journalist task is to bring it down to the reader. And I would like to stress it. It is not about, oh my God, look at me. Guess what came in? Oh my God, this is such a cool gadget. Yeah, it might be. Hold your excitement, allow your excitement, hold your excitement. The main job is where does it fit in to the life of your reader? Tech journalism is not about you. Tech journalism is not about the brand. Tech journalism is about the person who goes to your site, who logs into your YouTube channel, who pays money to read your publication. That's what tech journalism is about. Whatever you're holding in your hand, no matter how cool it is, if you cannot write something about it, which will help the reader, the viewer, you're not a tech journalist. I'm sorry. Radical.
No, I think that's amazing. It really helps. I think for all of us to understand how myopic sometimes we become with our PR outreach. So thank you for that. And I think that applies to any kind of PR. Actually, when you approach a journalist, you have to look at the larger picture. So thank you for that, Nimish, and thank you for grounding us and bringing us all back to that. I will, however, like to ask you, Debaman, what would you call a perfect PR pitch? Let's not even go to perfect. Let's say, how do you suggest a young person today or in PR can refine a good PR pitch? What would be your advice to them? What are the do's and don'ts for something like that?
So I'll break that down into a couple of things even before you go to the pitch. First and foremost important thing is to research about the journalist. Read the last 5 stories that the journalist has done. Typically we pick up the media list and say, hey, he's a senior correspondent, let's just call him. Read 5 stories that the journalist has done. You will get an understanding the way that the journalist writes and what the interests and how he writes the story. Then the second common mistake that I have also done previously is, basis that you send a pitch, right? And we tend to, if it's a request for introduction pitch, you send the same pitch to 4 journalists. It doesn't work. If you have researched that behind, that how that journalist writes, and then you tailor that pitch according to that. Thirdly, when we are usually pitching as PR professionals, we would say, hey, we are launching a product, but it doesn't matter that you're launching a product. Like Nimish said, how does that product impact my readers? That's what you need to pitch. At that time, you become like the product officer. Hey, this is going to change the world. This is what you should write about. But that doesn't help. If I'm pitching a story to a mint, the journalist needs to understand, and you need to first know who are reading mint. That would be very different from who are reading TechPP, right? You tailor your pitch according to that. You tailor your pitch to how journalist writes. Once you're doing that, I think that's where perfect is a wrong word, a good pitch can be.
Okay, thank you for that. Would you, Shalini, would you like to add to that? Would you like to share some successful case studies of some campaigns you have done in tech PR which have been successful, which have garnered great eyeballs? Just curious to know how you have approached this.
It definitely starts with reading, comprehending, understanding, which means hard work. It does require hard work from the PR executive. Also, it's also just like they put, and I'll give you an example of what we have done at some point in time. It also is about understanding who is the reader of the story. So, is it if you're pitching to a business daily, So obviously the business daily reader is going to be very different from like a tech magazine reader or a business magazine reader or a general magazine reader. Again, who in that? Is it the CEO or is it the IT manager? And to create a pitch, you need to actually, and I have done that with my team, again, it's hard work, speak to those, figure out from people and speak to them. They may not be related to your customer, to ask what is your challenge. Because once you give that story to the journalist, you're actually, and then how your client fits in. So couple of things, I mean, like for example, I just give a very, very easy thing, which people, everybody I'm sure here understands what Wi-Fi is, right? Which is, you're without wires, right? I come from an era where we actually used LAN cables. And when we introduced, so I had read about Wi-Fi and we were pitching Wi-Fi stories and journalists were writing about it. But actually, I comprehended it in peak summers in a hotel in Calcutta when I got my first Wi-Fi laptop. And I took it to, I remember, to the lawn over there. And I was just so excited sitting with it because there were no wires around me. Now, we had to pitch that to corporates. We had to pitch that to schools, to the education vertical. Now, how do you do that? And that means, so when we would reach out to, let's say, a publication, which covers the education vertical, they would, and they still say today, ye to technology hai. This is technology, reach out to the tech media. Now, how do you reach out to somebody writing on education, writing about laptops? So that's where media workshop comes in. You say, sir, ma'am, we don't want you to write your story. Can you spare 30 minutes and don't do it more than that? And especially nowadays, if you're going to do a web call or a video call, and actually, in reality, if you can actually show them how the product works, if you can do, so what we had done is we had taken our conference room, we had divided into two, laptops with wires, laptops without wires, called the education media. We didn't have to say anything. Now, a class 6 standard child would trip over wires. If there are no wires, so there is, all we are talking about is Wi-Fi. Similarly, if we talked about VPN, so these were the things that you've actually, for tech, you've got to show the product. So I've also worked for a company called Intel. That's a chip inside your device. And you're talking about speed of that device. You can't just do it with a press release. You got to look at it. You need to, if you want the influencer to write about it, you need the influencer to experience it and also be prepared for tough questions. So you need to have all that knowledge and then take it ahead. So this is what I've done and I continue to do it. But this is how, if the team does it, then, holistically as an agency, you do it.
Thank you for that, Shalini. Very helpful. I have a question to ask, and I'm going to begin with you, Debaman, and I'm addressing it to all of you. Three of you is, one thing is, of course, as you mentioned, you speak to the stakeholders in your own company. You understand from them the ins and outs. And as Shalini said, you devise situations where they can experience the product in a certain way, which helps them to understand, as you mentioned, the speed of a microchip is not something you can talk about in a press release. But when we look at young people today who may be working in different sectors in PR and they want to move to tech PR, there are no qualifiers as such. There is no course you can do as of now online in this certain vertical. Are there some online resources where you suggest people can upskill? Because one factor is, yes, you read, you learn, but there is a basic technical knowledge you will need to come abreast. You will at least to even understand, is this a good story angle? Is this even earth-shaking news? Because so many times brands come to an agency and say, what we are giving is the best product, right? But how does a PR person ascertain in the world of technology, that is it the best product or not? How do they make sure that what they're talking about to a journalist is actually correct? So how would you suggest, is there some particular such resource that people can upskill from? You're mute, Debaman.
I'll answer that question in two parts. First, you asked if a person is moving from lifestyle to tech PR, how does that person determine if that's the right sector in PR that the person wants to go to? I would say the first answer is it's Google. Just Google anything you want to do. For me, just forget if somebody is going from lifestyle to tech. I also entered tech from education, right? So everything's available on Google. There's nothing that you cannot find on the internet today. That's point number one. The second point that you spoke about is how do you determine that your client, what he's saying is actually the best? That's creative storytelling that you have to work towards. I'll take a small example. I work in the cybersecurity industry, right? There are X number of hacks happening. You see cyber attacks every day. There's strong reportage around that, right? A couple of days back, McAfee released a report which the headline of the report was Top 10 Dangerous Celebrities Searched for Online. Now, that's a very creative way of saying, the moment you say the word dangerous, and I was actually discussing this with a colleague, you would tend to open it. Now, if that's an idea that you're pitching to, let's say, McAfee would say, dangerous, are you mad? My Cristiano Ronaldo's PR manager would get behind me. The other people will get behind me. But it's actually, I tend to say this, that public relations is about being able to consult. You're not a content writer, you're not a media champ only, you're not an analyst person only. You need to know all of those, your business and your industry, and then finally be able to consult. That's why any firm would hire a PR agency. It's not just to get stories done or just to write press releases. So it's about, again, determining what the product offers, who the customers are, what are the unique values. Today there are 100,000 cybersecurity companies, right? When I'm talking to a journalist or even to an analyst, I need to be able to say, hey, this is how I am different. Again, for that to happen, you need to know enough about your competitors, the industry, and your own business. Again, like I said, everybody wants to be the best and everybody will say that I'm the best. But it's just those proof points that we usually say in PR that's the most important thing. How do you proof point those points? And we have all done messaging houses and all of those things, and those things are really very crucial. So for me, it's three things: reading, and reading, understanding your business, talking to enough stakeholders within that business. Even when we are sitting for interviews, you really listen what that other person is saying. There was a classic example. I was sitting at an interview with one of my ex-clients spokespeople. I recorded the interaction. I came back. Story was happening, not happening. This wasn't responding. 3 weeks later, the journalist called me up and said, hey, can you send me the recording? By then, I had deleted the phone and I didn't take that data back up.
Can you repeat the last line? Two lines? I think we lost you.
So I think that this is an incident that happened to me when I was in my agency days with one of my spokespeople that I was facilitating an interview. We recorded the interview on my smartphone, went back home, forgot about it. I changed my smartphone, forgot to take a data backup. 3 weeks later, the journalist calls and says, hey, you had the recording. Can you share that with me? Trust me not, I had written every point down what the spokesperson said. And because I knew the business, I could relate what he had said. I drafted a Q&A, told my client, hey, it's my bad that I lost the recording, but this is what he said. Trust me, the client did not make one single change in that document. And I apologized to the journalist and said, can you please take this Q&A instead? The journalist took a look at that and said, yeah, this is mostly what he spoke about. So it's about listening, knowing that's what PR is all about, and that is when you can actually consult your client or your CEO.
Thank you for that. They were very helpful. What about you, Nimish? What would you advise a young journalist, maybe from tech, not from tech, but definitely someone who's looking to do have a robust career in tech PR? How would you advise them to upskill themselves in this profession beyond, of course, as you said, reading, writing? Yes, understanding and comprehension is there, but what are there any resources that where they can actually learn from?
There are no formal resources. I mean, it's such a field that I think having formal resources would be next to impossible. I mean, we are technology is the kind of a field where somebody who's studying computer engineering right now, even while he's studying it, knows that by the time he or she graduates, the information they have is outdated. So it's moving at that kind of speed. It's very difficult to structure anything here. So unfortunately, or fortunately, it really boils down to what you're reading, how much you're reading. Another important point that someone like I had to keep in mind, I'm not a tech person. I'm a BCom and I'm an MBA. I'm not a tech person. I still can't, 20 years into the field, and I still cannot open a phone or open a computer and I cannot say what is where. But the important thing, a thing to remember when one is in public relations is, for example, when you said the point about your client claims that this is the best and is the first of its kind, how do you double check that? Suppose it's not on the web, it's a new client. Suppose how do you double check that? And here is where I feel there is something that a lot of PR professionals need to keep in mind, and some do, the best ones still do. I often get calls from people who say, look, we're not talking to you about a pitch, but somebody has come up to us with this. Now we have heard about this, but you are more exposed to this field. Someone is saying this feature is there in, say, an ultrasonic fingerprint scanner is available in a certain kind of phone. Now the client is saying this is amazing. Is it? And you're having access to so-called specialists always helps, because obviously you cannot access all the information no matter how much you read. There's always more to read. But yes, you can get across to somebody, and if your relationship with them is strong enough, which is why I keep saying the biggest word in public relations is not public, it's relations. If you have that access where you can just pick up a phone and say, Nemish, this is not about a pitch, and there are 7 or 8 people who I really, really admire a lot who do that. They say, this is not about a pitch, but you have written about this. You have written about this kind of a touch screen. Now, I have got somebody whom I won't name, sometimes I name them, whom I won't name, who's making this kind of thing. Is this special? And of course, I also gain from giving them feedback. It's not as if I'm giving them some confidential or hidden information, because if it is really innovative, hey, my readers would like to know about it, right? So, you have to keep reading. What you read is going to really depend upon the kind of field you're following. And B, I would say there needs to be more non-release, non-launch, non-event related interaction between the media and PR. Now, in our time, we actually used to have files in every journalist. We knew that this journalist at 4 o'clock in the evening will get down from the Asian Age office, will go to this shop, and he'll have a samosa. We knew that. Now, I'm not saying you have to micromanage to that extent. No, do not do that. But definitely, if I get a query about headphones, whom should I talk? If I've got a client about headphones, whom should I talk to? The best PR guys, we actually sometimes get devices when they say, look, this is a prototype. Can you just give us feedback as an expert? It's not about the it's not about getting a review or something. Just give us feedback as an expert. Most journalists would be very happy to participate in something that's new. They would be very happy to write about something that's new, be exposed to it. But that relationship has to be built. If you're going to keep it very transactional, that, oh, I'm going to talk to you only when I have a product and only when I have a launch or when I have an interview, then obviously your relationship is slightly different. So that is something I think we need to work on really.
Everybody listening in, this is very big advice. Please keep the transactional aspect out of your relations with media, because they are also people and they're there to help and support us. It's a symbiotic relationship. Shalini, I want to address this question to you. Nimish just said that we need to move away from the event based, press release based form of PR. We need to become more creative. We need to become more interactive. It has to be a more trusting relationship where we get valuable feedback from a journalist, and we can actually ascertain if a product is worth writing about, or if it has what it takes to make the cut. What is your thought on all this? How would you advise, or how would you run a PR campaign today?
Your question, can you just, there was a bit of disturbance. Your question to me is?
My question to you is, how do you in tech PR, and I'm taking off from what Nimish said, that you need to move beyond the event based, press release based form of PR to a more creative form of PR, or a more interactive, engaging form of PR with the right journalists. So, how would you suggest to run a tech PR campaign today?
Okay, so I think you need to be creative in any form of PR you do, right? Events are important. Press releases are more as an FYI. So when you're sending out a press release, it's important to manage your client's expectations. Tell them that this is going as an FYI. If it gets carried, kudos, but do not give them any assurance. Also, I think we are talking tech PR here. When it comes to, you need to figure out, because tech is further divided into a lot of aspects. I mean, if it's about networking, I'm not going to go to Nimish to talk about, talk about a router. Correct? It depends what publication he's working for and what are the kind of stories that interest him. Similarly, if it's a router story and it's tech story, I'm not going to go to a Sujit John in Times of India. I am going to go to Shubhendu Parth in Voice and Data or Data Quest. I need to figure out, firstly, I need to understand what is the journalist writing on, what is their interest. That is number one. Number two, when you're actually taking a story to a journalist, and if it's a text story, it depends if it's a pitch, if it's a storytelling you're doing, or if it's a workshop, or so it's not an event, but it's a media workshop. Sorry, that's my house. It's a media workshop where you're educating them about the product. If it's a story that you're doing, you need to ask your client who are the competitors, because you can't tell the journalist, my client is the only one who is doing it. There is nothing as the best or the first. Those are very scary words. You need to figure out who are the top three competitors. What is your USP? Your USP could just be customer service. You need to have customers available to endorse that. Customer quote will not do. The journalist should be able to speak to the customer. Ideally, and it doesn't happen now, unfortunately, if you can even get an industry analyst, any third party, it could be a professor in a college, in an MBA school, who could endorse the technology per se. So if you look at things like this together and you take it ahead, again, it comes down to what both the gentlemen have said, reading and interest. You know, what I see is people join an agency and there is, because the tech team needs somebody is pushed into it. So if you're really pushed into it and you're a passionate PR person, it should not make a difference of what beat you start learning about. But if you're not passionate and you're put into tech PR and you fear it so much, I think it's extremely important to go and tell your manager that you don't get it. So because all these things make a difference to campaign, to client servicing, and all of that.
Thank you, Shalini. Thank you for that insight. I think a lot of young people will learn a lot. I'm going to address, of course, the most important thing that happened to us this year, 2020, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. Debaman, I'm going to begin with you. Has it, we also reminding everybody we have 10 minutes left to wrap up, so we're going to make this section a little more rapid. Do you think the COVID-19 pandemic has affected this field in any way? Do you feel that things have changed?
Uh, I think for me, with my personal experience, it has helped me. I get more time with the business now. Block the calendars, get the time. Now they can't run away for other meetings. So I think for me, it has really helped. Just for the fact that you can balance your day much more depending on your priorities. And I think today, because of the pandemic, I think personally that you can get more time with the business if you plan ahead.
Thanks for that. That's a very positive reward. Nimish, what about you? I think the media itself has had to. We've read so much about the media having so many challenges at this time. Has it affected the tech media? Will it affect tech media and PR relationships in the next few months or years?
Yeah, I mean, yes, of course, it's had a bigger, pretty bigger, a pretty big impact on the media and the tech relationship. It's our ways of changing have our ways of working. I'm having a problem with words. I'm having our ways of working have changed a lot. Interactions are now the good part is there is more time, as Debaman rightly pointed out. Now everyone is there. You don't have to go to an office and wonder if the person is there or not. You actually can simply say, "Can I call you in 5 minutes? Can we just have a video talk in 10 minutes?" That thing is there, which is terrific. But for me, the big challenge that's coming across right now, and this is a challenge that I feel the peer community has to take on right now, is what is happening is there's not been a significant change in the manner of working. If you know what we mean, we are still trying to extrapolate a meeting in front of a video camera. We're still trying to extrapolate a event in front of a camera. Okay, it's the same thing, only there is no audience. It's the same kind of meeting, only there is no cafe and there's no coffee around you. Now, that I think is something we need to get out of because I think the whole com scenario has changed a fair bit. Now, writers are, I mean, when it speaks to journalists, their biggest challenge is working from home. The deadlines suddenly no longer exist because online has become much more important. You're at home all the time. You've got other things to do all the time. Suddenly, the whole concept of we will hold this guy still and we'll give him a 1.5 hour event on the video is not very clever. It's not very clever. There are lots of people. It never used to happen. In the past, the journalist had gone to the venue. He sat down. He was expecting, okay, 2 hours is okay. Here, he's at home. He or she is at home. 2 hours, trying to do the same thing, and the person's phone is ringing, the doorbell is ringing, the courier has just come, your kids have come back from school, and so on and so forth. That thing has got to be customized. That the kind of storytelling has got to change. I might say the time for bells and whistles is perhaps going. We need to get back to basics, good old what is important, and we're going to tell you. That needs to happen. It's not happening right now. We are seeing so many launches happening, and all of them are exactly the same way. It's the same PowerPoint presentation, only it is not on a big screen inside a hall. It is on your phone, but it is the same presentation. That needs to change.
Thank you. Shalini, what about you? Do you think it has changed, and what do you foresee for this sector in the coming months? That's another question that the audience has just sent in.
I think amongst all sectors, tech has been resilient and tech has really grown with the pandemic. People have realized people are actually going, companies, there's digitization happening. So if you look at from the from the corporate side and even agencies who are handling tech clients, it's going great. Both the gentlemen said there is a lot of time. I would disagree because now you're at home and everybody is dealing with this very differently. It's really uncertain times. There is a sort of a fear. And also, when you're going to work, when you're meeting people, there's some sort of release happening, right? I mean, I'm wearing an eyeliner after such a long time. Okay. So I'm just saying is that, no. So it's the whole thing that, you're not bothered how you're dressed. It's a very boring routine that's happening, even if you just take work away, right? Now, when you come to work, there has been a lot of change where the media is concerned also. A lot of media has been let out. Okay, so now, which means that there are fewer journalists, but the stories are still that many. Okay, you need to figure out, I think the whole PR route is changing. You need to really bring in owned media. You need to talk about how content engagement has to be done. As Nimish said, you do not have to have those PowerPoints. What if you talk to Nimish? Nimish is very active on Facebook and Twitter. What if your client talks to Nimish on Twitter? Okay, or and Nimish is likely to respond to it. You need to do it all in bite size versus these 1 or 2 hours, because they're like, for example, it's lunchtime. I don't know how many people have stayed on, how many people are responsible to serve lunch at home, right? So all this, it has changed, but as for the tech industry, it's been great. So nobody has been fired when it's hardcore tech. Is what is my take.
Thank you, everyone. That's very heartening to know. We are unfortunately out of time, and I've been told by our event organizer that we are now done with the session. But I'm going to give a very quick one sentence. I'm going to ask all three of you. Debaman, the best PR advice you got out when you started out.
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Honestly, we as communication professionals fail to communicate internally. So, communicate as much as possible and ask as many questions as you can.
Thank you. What about you, Nimish? What is the best advice you got when you started out?
Oh, no, I kind of made it up as I went along. I kind of made it as it went along. But my biggest takeaway would be 2 words: be there. Be there for the reader. Be there for the journalist. Be there for your client. If you're going to be there, the person is going to ask you. The person will get back to you. But the person has to be conscious of you. You are not a press release. You're not a press release. You're not a brand. You're a person. Be there in that facility, and people will respond.
Thank you so much. Amazing. What about you, Shalini? We have no time left. Tarun is going to give me.
Yeah, I would say listen and be inquisitive is what I was told, and I do it till today.
Sorry, this has been, this is the first session I've done where we are talking about tech PR, and I've had the maximum muted mix, including my own. So, so anyway, I would really like to thank you all for joining us today. We've had a whole set of questions come in on our Facebook page as well, where the session is live streaming right now, and I would request all three of you to spare 5 minutes or 10 minutes sometime over the weekend and just see if any of those questions are something you feel like answering at any point of time. Debaman, Nimish, and Shalini, this has been such a great learning session. Even I've been terrified of approaching hardcore tech PR, and you've really demystified it for me today. So thank you for that. And I'm sure our audience is much the richer for this conversation. I would like to thank you all, and I would like to remind our audience that we've live tweeted and live put Insta stories out there on our PRPOI social media handles. So please go ahead and look for the most quotable quotes from the session today. We will be there on YouTube as well, and we will be posting the entire session on our LinkedIn page. So in case anybody came in late or has missed something or wants to hear it again, please feel free to do so. I'd really like to thank the three of you today for this, and as well as a final thank you to our media partner, Scribe, for partnering with us for this session. My brilliant content curators, Tarunjit and Pooja. Tarunjit incidentally also handles all the tech in this, so she's worth a mention today for this tech PR panel. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for an amazing session. Hope you all
Thank
have
you
a
for
wonderful.
having us, Sonali.
Thank you. Thank you, Debaman. Thank you, Nimish. Thank you, Shalini. Thank you. Thank you.